Good day everyone, good day sir. Today we will tackle about the evolution of the Philippine Constitution. So here are our learning objectives. So first is identify the different Philippine Constitution and their historical timelines. So the Malolos 1899, 1935, and 1973, and 1987. Then analyze the similarities and differences among the Philippine constitutions, show appreciations for the role of the Constitution in maintaining democracy and national sovereignty, and value national identity, independence, and the principles enshrined in the Philippine Constitution. So, a constitution, it is a set of fundamental principles or established precedents that guide how a state or an organization is governed. So, it outlines the structure of government, the distribution of powers, and the rights of citizens, serving as the highest legal authority. So, beyond its legal function, kaning word nga constitution is also suggests the idea of forming a unified whole, so bringing together individuals or groups under shared ideals and values. So, ang kaning constitution is not only defines the nature and limits of government, but also symbolizes the collective identity and also the purpose of a society. So, Constitution of the Philippines. So, this refers to the fundamental law that defines how the Philippine government is organized, how it functions, and the rights of its people. So, it is the legal foundation of the country. So, we have the supreme law of the Republic of the Philippines. So, this means that the Constitution is the highest legal authority in the country. All other laws, government actions, and court decisions must follow what is written in the Constitution. So, no law or official act can go against it. So, next we have has been in effect since 1987. So, this refers to the current Constitution, so which was ratified by the people through a national plebiscite in 1987. So, after the fall of Marcos dictatorship, it replaced the 1973 Constitution and has been used ever since. Next, there were only 3 other constitutions that have effectively governed the country. We have 1935 Commonwealth Constitution, 1973, and 1986 Freedom Constitution. So, these are the 3 constitutions that govern the Philippines before the 1987 versions. Is kaning the 1935 Commonwealth Constitution is established when the Philippines was transitioning from a U.S. colony to an independent nation. So it set up a democratic government in preparation to full independence. So 1973 Constitution introduced under President Ferdinand Marcos during martial law. So it changed the government to a parliamentary system and expanded executive power. Next we have katong 1986 na, so Freedom Constitution. So, a temporary constitution set up by President Corazon Aquino after the People Power Revolution. So, it allowed her to govern while drafting the permanent 1987 Constitution. So, the 1987 Constitution of Biak na bato. So, kaning Constitution of Biak na bato kay was founded and created or adopted in 1897 and not 1987. So, it served as the provincial or temporary constitution of the Republic of Biak na bato during the Philippine Revolution against Spanish colonial rule. So, the Constitution of Biak na bato was the provisionary constitution of the Philippine Republic during the Philippine Revolution. So, this means that the Biak na bato was a temporary framework used by the revolutionary government while fighting for independence from Spain. So, it laid out the structure of the first declared Filipino Republic, though it was not recognized by the Spanish authorities. So next is the Katipunan Revolution lead to the Tejeros Convention where at San Francisco de Malabon, Cavite on March 22, 1987. So the first presidential and vice presidential elections in Philippine history were held, although only Katipuneros or members of the Katipunan were able to take part and not general populace. So it explains how the Katipunans, a revolutionary group fighting Spanish rule, organized the Tejeros Convention, which became a significant political event. So, pag March 22, 1987, they held the first recorded presidential and vice presidential elections in the Philippines. So, however, only Katipunan members participated, not all Filipinos, making it a limited electorate. So, next we have a later meeting of the revolutionary government established there, held on November 1, 1987. So, at Biak na Bato in the town of San Miguel de Mayumo in Bulacan. So, established the Republic of Biak na Bato. So, it says that pag November 1, 1987, the revolutionary leaders met again. So, this time in Biak na Bato. So, located in San Miguel de Mayumo, Bulacan. So, at this meeting, they officially created the Republic of Biak na Bato, so declaring a Filipino government separate from Spain. So next is the Republic had a constitution drafted by Isabelo Artacho and Felix Ferrer, and based on the first Cuban constitution, it is known as the Constitution Provisional de la República de Filipinas. So, and was originally written in and promulgated in the Spanish and Tagalog languages. So it tells us that ang Biak na Bato daw Constitution was written by Isabelo Artacho and Felix Ferrer. So it was inspired by the Cuban Constitution, which also aimed at independence from the colonial rule. So the Constitution was officially called the Provisional Constitution of the Republic of the Philippines and was written in Spanish and Tagalog, the main languages used at that time. So next we have the organs of the government under the Constitution of Biak na Bato. So we have three organs of the government under the Constitution of Biak na Bato. So first we have Supreme Council. So Supreme Council was the main governing body of the Republic of the Biak na Bato. So it held the executive power. For example, like the president or the cabinet in today's government. So it was headed by a president. So Emilio Aguinaldo at that time. So it had 4 department secretaries in charge of. We have Interior, Foreign Affairs, and Treasury, and War. So ang Interior, sila mo'y manage sa local governance and public orders. So, ang Foreign Affairs, kay mo na siya ang handle the relationship with other nations or mga foreign forces. Ang Treasury, or sa ato apa is Treasurer, mo na sila ang manage sa finance. And ang War, sila mo'y oversaw military affairs and mo'y defense. So, next we have the Consejo Supremo de Gracia y Justicia, or Supreme Council of Grace and Justice. So this was the judicial branch or court system of the revolutionary government. So it had the authority to review and decide on the legal cases. So it could approve or reject any decisions made by the lower court. So it also created and procedures for the justice system, so ensuring law and order. So in short, kaning in function like today's Supreme Court, ensuring justice and fairness. So the last one is Asamblea or Assembly de Representantes. So Assembly of the Representatives. So this was a planned legislative body. So it meant to represent the people. It was not active yet during the revolution but was intended to be formed after victory. So its tasks were to draft a new and permanent constitution, then to elect a new government council, and to represent the voice of the people in future governance. So This shows the revolutionary leaders aim to transition to a democratic system after gaining independence. So the preamble of the Biak na Batu Constitution. So it explains that the main goal of the Philippine Revolution, which began on August 24, 1896. So was to achieve the complete separation of the Philippines from Spanish rule and to establish an independent nation called the Philippine Republic. So it states that revolutionaries were acting on behalf of the Filipino people, faithfully representing their desires for freedom and self-governance. So with authority given to them by the people, the representatives of the revolution met at the Biak na Batu pag November 1, 1897 and unanimously adopted the Constitution as the foundation for a free and independent Filipino government. So this marked a formal declaration of their intent to form a sovereign state. So 1899 Malolos Constitution. So known as the Constitution Politica de Malolos, and it was written in Spanish. So means that the Malolos Constitution was the first official and democratic constitution of the Philippines, and it was called Constitution Politica de Malolos, so in Spanish. So since Spanish was the language of the educated and the government at that time, so the document was originally written in Spanish. And then following the declaration of independence from Spain on June 12, 1898 and transformation of the dictatorial government to a revolutionary government on 23 June. So the historical context. So it explains that the historical context. So after Philippine independence was declared on June 12, 1898, the temporary dictatorial government led by Emilio Aguinaldo was changed into a revolutionary government on June 23, 1898 to prepare for a more permanent form of governance. So the Malolos Constitution was part of this transition to formal structured self-rule. Convent in Barasuan Church in Malolos. So now Malolos City, Bulacan. So the Malolos Congress, which created the Constitution, gathered at Barasuan Church in the town of Malolos, Bulacan, known as the Malolos City. So this church became the birthplace of the first Philippine Republic and holds great historical importance. So Pedro Paterno as president and Gregorio Araneta as vice president. So in the Malolos Congress, si Pedro Paterno served as the president or presiding officer, and Gregorio Araneta was the vice president. So they helped lead the discussions and decision making in drafting the Constitution. So next is opposed by Apolinario Mabini, so the Prime Minister of the Revolutionary Government. So Apolinario Mabini, who was the Prime Minister and a trusted advisor of Aguinaldo, so opposed some parts of the Malolos Constitution. So he feared it gave too much power to the legislature and weakened the executive branch, which could lead to instability during a time of war with the Americans. Ratified on November 29, 1898, signed into law on December 23, and approved on January 20, 1899. So, pag November 29, 1898, the Malolos Congress ratified or formally approved the draft. And pag December 23, 1898, it was signed into law by the Congress. And pag January 20, 1899, it was officially approved and implemented, making it the first Republican Constitution in Asia. So, sanctioned by President Emilio Aguinaldo on January 21 and promulgated on January 22. So President Emilio Aguinaldo officially approved or sanctioned the Malolos Constitution pag January 21, 1899, and it was formally announced or put into effect or promulgated the next day pag January 22. So this marked the official start of the first Philippine Republic, and anchored in democratic traditions that ultimately had their roots in American soil, modeled on the Constitution of France, Belgium, and Latin American countries. So, The Malolos Constitution was based on democratic ideals such as popular sovereignty, civil liberties, and separation of powers. So, while inspired partly by American democratic principles, so its structure and content were more closely modeled after the European, especially French and Belgian and Latin American's constitution. Next is states the people have exclusive sovereignty. So this means that the power to govern belongs solely to the people. So the government exists because of the people's will, and all authority must come from them. So this was a strong rejection of colonial rule and monarchy, affirming popular sovereignty. Next is it states basic civil rights, separated the church from the state, and called for the creation of an assembly of representatives which would act as a legislative body. So the constitution is guaranteed civil rights such as freedom of speech, religion, and protection from unlawful arrest, separated church and state, ending the political power of the Catholic Church in government affairs. So called for an assembly of representatives, a legislative body elected by the people to create laws similar to a modern-day Congress or parliament. Next is it also calls for a presidential form of government with the president elected for a term of 4 years by a majority of the assembly. So the constitution is established a presidential system where ang president serve as the head of the state and government. So unlike direct elections by the public, kay ang president no was to be elected by a majority vote of the Assembly of Representatives for a term of 4 years. The authentic and official constitution of La Republica Filipina or Philippine Republic is emphasizes that ang Malolos Constitution was the first true and official constitution of the First Republic or the La Republica Filipina. It marked the Philippines' first attempt at establishing an independent, sovereign, and democratic government. The preamble of the Malolos Constitution. So, the preamble of Malolos Constitution expresses the intent and purpose behind the creation of that Constitution. So, it begins with the representatives of the Filipino people who were legally gathered to create a framework for the newly independent Filipino government. And the main goals outlined in the preamble include establishing justice, ensuring the common defense of the country, promoting the general welfare of the citizens, and guaranteeing the benefits of liberty for all Filipinos. And it also acknowledges the role of a higher power seeking the aid of the sovereign legislator of the universe, a reference to God in achieving those noble objectives. In doing so, the representatives voted, decreed, and sanctioned the Constitution, marking the formal establishment of the first Philippine Republic under a legal framework of governance. 1935, the Commonwealth Constitution. So, the 1935 Constitution of the Philippines was written in 1934, approved and adopted by the Commonwealth of the Philippines 1935 to 1946, and later used by the Third Republic of the Philippines 1946 to 1972. So, pag 1935 Constitution was drafted in 1934 and approved and formally adopted by the Commonwealth of the Philippines, a government that existed from 1935 to 1946 under U.S. administration. So, after the Philippines gained full independence in 1946, the Constitution continued to be used by the Third Republic of the Philippines until 1972. So when it was replaced by the 1973 Constitution under the martial law. So it was written with an eye to meeting the approval of the United States government as well, so as to ensure that the U.S. would live up to its promise to grant the Philippines independence and not have a premise to hold on its position onto the grounds that it was too politically immature and hence unready to full real independence. So the 1935 Constitution was designed to be acceptable to the U.S. government, ensuring that the U.S. would keep its promise to grant the Philippines independence after years of colonial rule. So the Constitution aimed to demonstrate that the Philippines was politically mature enough to govern itself, which would prevent the US from using the argument that the Philippines was too politically immature and thus unable to manage its own affairs as a fully independent country. So next is the original 1935 Constitution established a unicameral legislature, meaning a single legislative body as opposed to having two chambers or houses. It also defined the presidency, specifying that the president would serve a single 6-year term with no re-election allowed. So kausar gud sila mo kanang lansar and serve 6-year term. And it was amended in 1940 to have a bicameral Congress composed of a Senate and a House of Representatives, as well as the creation of an independent commission on elections. So, pag 1940, the 1935 Constitution was amended to establish a bicameral Congress. And the Constitution limited the President to a 4-year term with a maximum of 2 consecutive terms in office. So another amendment na sad sa 1935 Constitution established that the President could serve for only a 4-year term with a limit of 2 consecutive terms ra sila. Dapat kaduha rin sila modagan. This was a key of provision to prevent any one individual from holding the presidency for too long and to ensure political stability through regular elections. So, Preamble of the Commonwealth Constitution. Preamble of the Commonwealth Constitution expresses the Filipino people's aspirations and the purpose behind the creation of their government. So, it begins by specially seeking the help of divine providence or the God for guidance in establishing a government and that would reflect the ideals and values of the nation. So the preamble emphasizes the importance of preserving and developing the country's resources or patrimony and promoting the general welfare of all Filipinos. It also highlights the goal of securing independence for future generations under a government based on justice, liberty, and democracy. Ultimately, the preamble sets the tone for the creation of a government that serves the people, ensuring freedom, fairness, and progress for both the present and future citizens of the Philippines.
Okay, so good morning everyone. So now let's proceed to the 1973 Philippine Constitution. So the 1973 Philippine Constitution, this was introduced from a presidential to a parliamentary system. When we say parliamentary system, it is a system that includes the Prime Minister or the Premier, and this was chosen by the legislative branch or the parliament. So, under the system is a legislative power that is vested in a unicameral National Assembly. So, gi-replace nila ang katong mga bicameral nga mga Congress, and the President, who serves as the symbolic state or the head of state, was elected by the National Assembly. So, gi-elect siya and for a term of 6 years. So, gitagan siya 6 years and pwede po na siya ma-re-elect without the term limits. But, however, in order to maintain the non-partisan nature of the people, ang president needs siya require siya to resign from membership in the assembly and also withdraw po siya from any kanang political party affiliation during the term of office. So, the 1973 Constitutional Authoritarianism. So, on August 24, 1970, the Congress enacted RA number 631-32, otherwise known as the Constitutional Convention. So, while in the process of drafting a new constitution, the President Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law on September 21, 1972, and the 73 Constitution established a parliamentary-style government with legislative power in a unicameral National Assembly. The President serves as a symbolic head of state, elected by the Assembly for a 6-year term and could be re-elected indefinitely, but had to resign from the Assembly and political parties during the term. Called Citizens' Assemblies approved that martial law should be continued and ratified the amendments to the Constitution proposed by President Marcos. The 1976 amendments were an interim batasang pambansa, or IBP, substituting for the Interim National Assembly. The president would also become the prime minister, and he would continue to exercise legislative powers until such time as martial law was lifted. The president is authorized to issue laws, decrees, orders, or instructions if he believes that there is a serious emergency or if the legislative fails to act, and these issuance will become part of the law. So, the 1976 amendments to the Philippine Constitution, this was introduced, or it introduced significant changes that further concentrated power in the hands of the President Ferdinand Marcos. And one of the key amendment po niya is it was replaced by the Interim National Assembly, or with a new legislative body called katong the Interim Batasang Pambansa, or IBP. And additionally, ang president, it was also allowed to assume the role of prime minister. Pwede siya ma-assume as role as a prime minister, giving Marcos both executive and also legislative na authority as a president or as a prime minister. So, from October 16 to 17, in 1976, a nationwide vote was held through citizen assemblies which were gathered o barangay kan mga villages, voters organized by the Marcos administration during those times. So, ito nga mga event, a majority of these voters approved the two key things. So, first is the continuation of martial law and the ratifications of constitutional amendments. This was proposed by the President Ferdinand Marcos during that time. So this means that ang katong mga tao through these assemblies, they were asked to support the ongoing kanang imposition of kanang martial law which had been declared in 1972, and also to accept changes to the 1973 constitutions that would further strengthen the Marcos control over the government at the time. So ang kaning process, it was very controversial as critics question whether it is kanang truly reflected the free of the people, or it was kanang just kanang manipulated in order to kanang legitimize Marcos authoritarian's role. So here's the preamble of 1973 Constitution. So we, the sovereign Filipino people, imploring the aid of divine providence in order to establish a government that shall embody our ideals, promote the general welfare, conserve and develop the patrimony of our nation, and also secure to ourselves and our posterity the blessings of democracy under a regime of justice, peace, liberty, and equality, do ordain and promulgate this Constitution. So this means that the preamble of the Philippine Constitution state that as a Filipino people or citizen, that with God's guidance, we establish a government to reflect our ideas, promote the common good, and also protect the national heritage, and uphold the democracy, and also the peace, the justice, freedom, and equality for present and also for next nga mga generations. Okay, so the 1987 Constitution, or also known as the Freedom Constitution, was officially ratified and took effect on February 11, 1987, following the end of martial law and the People Power Revolution at the time. So it is established in the Philippines as a democratic and republican state, affirming that sovereignty resides in the people and all the government authority from them. So in order para mag-guide ng atong country at the time, there was a transition nga nahitabo from authoritarian rule to democracy. So the President Corazon Aquino issued the Proclamation Number 3, and this proclamation declared that a national policy nag-aim siya at implementing the reforms demanded by the people, safeguarding their fundamental rights, and also adopting a provisional constitution. So and also ensuring a smooth and also kanang orderly transition na ang new democratic nga government at that time. So ang 1987 Constitution, this became kanang symbol of restored and democracy, and also kanang commitment to human rights, justice, and freedom. So the executive branch is the Philippine government that was led by the president, who serves as both the head state and also the chief executive. So ang mo-assess sa president is the appointed cabinet, which also kanang motabang siya in implementing national policies and also oversee various government departments. So while ang president is nagupot siya daghan nga authority, ang 1987 Constitution, it ensures nga ang katong power is balanced ka siya and also by checks from the legislative and also judicial branches. So, kaning limitations are especially important during the times of emergency because it is a way to prevent the abuse of power, no? So, dili good kanang magamiton ang power nila in order to kanang mag-abuse og lain nga mga tao, diba? And also dili po na nila pwede gamiton ang ilang power to control the country. So kaning structure, this was also deliberately designed to kanang in response to the country's experience under the Ferdinand Marcos law regime. So in order to avoid nga kanang nanapoy ma-authoritarian rule or authoritarian rule sa country, so ang katong nga mga law is nag-implement sila og katong mga democratic na mga principles. So, ang judicial branch of the Philippines, they are responsible nga mo-interpret sa mga law and also nag-ensure sila nga naay justice, no? And also, it was headed by the Supreme Court, which consists of 15 justices. So, kaning mga justices, they are appointed by the President from a list of nominees that kanang was provided by the Judicial and Bar Council. So, this body is designed to ensure that merit-based selection, and also ang Supreme Court is kanang national authority to kanang hear appeals and also particularly those involving constitutional questions and also mga jurisdictional complex and serious criminal cases. So it also holds kanang mga original jurisdiction over cases that involves kanang mga high-ranking government or international nga mga officials. So in addition to its kanang judicial functions rather, so ang Supreme Court supervise nila ang tanan nga lower courts in the country, ensuring nga ang katong nga mga court is consistent and also fair ang applications of the law across the kanang judicial system. So next is changing the constitution. So constitutional reform in the Philippines, also known as charter change, refers to the political and legal process needed to amend the current 1987 Constitution of the Philippines. So under the common interpretation of the Constitution, amendments can be proposed by one of the three methods: a people's initiative, a constituent assembly, or a constitutional convention. According to common interpretation, na ay three main ways to propose kanang amendments. First, through is kanang people initiative, where ang mga citizen is directly petition sila for change. Ang second is a constituent assembly, which is nagcompose siya og members sa mga congress who come together to propose revisions. And also third is through a constitutional convention. So this refers to a specially elected body tasked with kanang reviewing and also kanang recommending kanang mga changes. So ang each method is nag-involve siya mga lain-lain nga mga processes, but ultimately is kanang ang iyang aim is nagalagad siya to allow the country or kanang to update or reform its fundamental law through a democratic nga process or paagi. Next is about the President Estrada and President Arroyo at that time. So they tried sila to change the 1987 Constitution, but na-fail sila because ang plan ni former President Estrada is gitawag niya Concord. So ang Concord is ganan sila nga mo-ease ang rules to attract foreign businesses, but dagan ang mga tao nga ni-oppose ana nga plano because mahadlok sila nga basin ma-harm ang country, and also naguna-una pud sila nga basin ang maka-benefit is ang katurang ni-implement ana. And next, si President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo pud, she also tried to change the constitution by using the Congress to propose the amendments, but ang iyang efforts is na-fail gihapon because naay mga daghan nga controversies nga nigawas during her time as president and worries nga kanang ganahan lang siya nga she wanted kanang to extend her time in office. Okay, so si President Fidel Ramos, he was the first to try nga alidan ang 1987 Constitution. Ganahan siya nga ang Constitution i-switch siya into a parliamentary system katong Prime Minister and also remove tong mga term nga mga limits. So, but ang daghan nga mga tao nga ni-oppose ana because they thought nga kanang para lang tumatabangan si Fidel Ramos sa iyang term ato nga time. But during the time, he also tried to use a people's initiative, so which is a signature campaign. But ang Supreme Court is they reject ang iyang plan because walay proper law nga nag-allow. So let's proceed to the Aquino's administration. So during the Aquino's time as president, daghang mga ideas in Congress nga i-change ang constitution, like switching it to federal system and opening up the economy more. So during the time of President Duterte, a group called the Consultative Committee or the CONCOM, it was formed to draft a new federal constitution called the Bayanihan Constitution. So kaning nga draft, this included the rules to stop politicians from switching parties rather, just to win and also to limit powerful political families. So now let's proceed to the federalism. So when you say federalism, it is a way of running a country where a power is shared between the national government and the smaller local governments. So kanang mga, for example, like states or provinces. So the country is divided into several independent states that manage their own affairs, but silang tanan, they all work together under one national government. So the purpose of federalism, it aims to give more freedom and also control to different regions. It can also help to address local problems better and also encouraging balance between development across the nation.